Hello and welcome to lesson 1.5. I'm Mr. C. Today's lesson is going to build upon the one we did yesterday. The materials we're going to need today are going to be pretty simple. An eraser, some sort of erasing tool that's nice and clean, a graphite pencil, the lighthouse sketch that we did previously, and some sort of large sheet of paper or perhaps a folder, 18.5 by 24 inches around, or perhaps an A2 sheet of paper, if that's something you prefer. It's just going to be something to contain our drawings once we've finished with them. My assistants are setting out an 18 by 24 sheet of paper for me here. Now, if you don't have this, that's totally fine. Just clear off your drawing space, whatever you're using. Any sort of folder will work, but if you've got this, what I want you to try and do is take this large sheet of paper, turn it around, line up the corners, and using a ruler or some sort of straight object, try and press down the fold so it's nice and flat. So it kind of looks like a magazine or a comic book. The idea is that once you've got a folder that you can contain your work in, we're going to use it as a portfolio. Portfolios are just containers that contain all the drawings that you've used that you feel represent your growth as an artist. So ones that you're particularly happy with, that you feel like you've accomplished something with. Just pop them right in there. Now, don't feel bad if you don't have an 18 by 24 sheet of paper. You don't need one. Anything will do. If you have a folder that your parent or guardian can provide you with from an office supply store, or perhaps a file folder, something that they might be able to spare for you to use, or something that you can use from school that might work for you just as well. Anything that'll contain your drawings and keep them from being bashed up. Now for the first part of this exercise, I also want you just to look at The Lighthouse at Two Lights by Edward Hopper one additional time. Observe those finer details in this painting. Previously, we just created a sketch that gave you more of an impression of a work of art. But now's our chance to deepen those details and really get a better study of Edward Hopper's beautiful painting. I want you to pause the video and really just observe it for about 1 minute. So place your drawing back on the drawing surface, wherever you are deciding to do it. Make sure it's nice and clear. Just pick up your graphite pencil, and I want you to have a look at the areas of gray that we isolated last time in our little drawing here. Now, looking at the observation of the painting by Edward Hopper, you'll be able to see that there's probably a lot more variations in gray and in tones of shadow in the painting than we actually had a chance to do in our little sketch. So this is an opportunity for us to get in there and really sort of flatten out, smooth out a lot of those areas of shadow. You'll notice that there are areas that on the sides of the buildings, for example, where the building itself gets in the way of the sunlight. And those are known as form shadows. It's when an object blocks light that's falling onto itself. You'll see that one side of that lighthouse is in shadow and the other side is clearly in light. That's known as a form shadow. You'll also notice that the lighthouse is casting a bit of a shadow onto the ground next to it, to the left of it, and onto the bushes, onto the trees that are below it. That's known as a cast shadow because it's casting a shadow onto something else. Now all these shapes, all these shadows have their own definitive little shapes. I tend to go in there with my little pencil, as you can see, and outline the area of the shadow first and then kind of fill it in. Just like that. You can see that little scribble there. I can tell that one side is going to be a little bit lighter and one side is going to be a little bit darker than the other. Keep flipping back and forth between the painting and your drawing, reading shadows, just like we did in the last video. we're attempting to try and get this a little bit more accurate. Remember, we're taking a sketch and we're pulling it a little bit further towards representational reality, making it look a little bit closer like what we observe in nature. Now, don't attempt to keep up with my incredibly fast hand sketching along here on this piece of paper. I've actually sped up my video here so it's about twice normal speed. This drawing should take you about 30 minutes or so to refine and invest with a lot more detail. Now you may notice here that I'm starting to go back into my grayer areas and start to add even deeper shadows, trying to isolate little shadow shapes inside the larger shadow shapes, make them a little bit darker. Those ellipses up at the top of the cylinder of the lighthouse are starting to get a little bit darker as well. And now I'm starting to shade in the sky a little bit. Now, you may be asking yourself why I'm doing that. Well, the sky, as you can tell in the picture, is actually a very dark blue. It's not a very bright blue. It's a very clear, deep, dark blue, and I'm starting to sort of put in a layer of gray around that, a layer of shadow that kind of represents the value or the shade of gray of the sky. As you may notice that I'm starting to work my way in from the edges. It's always darker around the edges. Hopper did that on purpose to sort of make it look nice and very dramatic. I'm using my finger here to sort of smudge and smooth out my strokes. And you may notice also that I'm trying to, when I'm working my way in, I always try to make the areas of shadow around the lighter areas, like the cylinder of the lighthouse. That seems to be one of the biggest, brightest focal points of the entire picture. And everything around it seems to be just a little bit darker, including the sky. More blending, darkening my darks, lightening my lights. Putting even more shadow and value around the grass. Again, value just means shades of gray. Getting my finger nice and smudgy. Every single shadow is darker on one side than the other. Yep. And then I want you to pick up your eraser once you feel a little bit satisfied as to where your shadows are. And instead of thinking about it as a way of correcting mistakes, I want you to think about it as a way of sort of adding white, kind of like white paint, to your drawing here. And if you make a mistake, that's fine. You can always go back and put in a little bit more graphite, a little bit more value around the areas that you may have over erased or over highlighted. Keep trying to find areas that, if as you are adding layers of gray, could be taken a little bit darker or maybe made a little bit lighter, just like the roof of that house right there. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Nothing good ever came of being too precious with your drawing. And you can always correct things. You've got a tool now that can help you do that. It's more like you're painting with graphite, isn't it? When you're doing sketches like this, when you're elaborating on previous work. You're starting to think about things with a strategy in mind, about how you can correct things as you go. Pretty great, right? And don't forget, sign your work when you're done. Nice job. C+. So let's talk a little bit more about how powerful shadows can be. This is Shadow Sculpture 14 by Tim Noble and Sue Webster. Now, part of the picture here has been obscured. I want you to sort of describe to yourself what you see in this picture. Does it look dramatic? Does it look complete? Okay. Now, what if I showed you the rest of this sculpture? Now, how does it make you feel? What does the rest of this photograph reveal once the shadow's been removed? This is a work called A to Z by Kumi Yakashida. How important is shadow to this work of art? and this is simply called Ring by Chris Ten Eyck. How important is shadow to this picture? Imagine if the photograph had been taken and the light wasn't where it was, casting the shadow on the book in a different way. Would it still have the same impact? Would you still feel about it the same way? So, what ideas have you come up with today? Thank you very much for watching.